5:36 p.m. Welcome and good evening, everyone, to the May 11th meeting of the City of Eugene Budget Committee. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format, which enables the Budget Committee to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping its members, staff, and the public safe. As always, I want to take a moment to reflect on what a privilege it is to be here and to be able to participate in this process. I hope that all of us, from committee members to staff to members of the public joining us in this meeting, consider what allows us all to be here today as we do this work, and consider also who is unable to join us for any number of reasons. Some of this committee's work may have its strongest impact on people least able to participate in the process. I hope that we will all keep that in mind as we deliberate. At 5:41, we will begin public comment. This period is for those wishing to make comment on the FY23 proposed budget. If you would like to speak during public comment, you must have virtually raised your hand or pressed *9 if joining by phone. The period to do so will end at 5:41, and the meeting moderator will unraise or disallow any requests to speak after that time. Each person will have 2.5 minutes to speak. We have 30 minutes allotted for public comment on the agenda. In order to allow as many people as possible to speak, please be succinct in your comments. The meeting moderator will announce the next 2 speakers at a time. When it's your turn, your name will be announced and you will be promoted to panelist. Please preface your statement with your name, city of residence, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known. There are lights on the timer. The yellow light indicates you have 30 seconds remaining. When your time is concluded, the moderator will demote you to attendee and your microphone will be muted. For those who have connected via phone and don't have the benefit of seeing the timer, please be aware that your microphone will be muted at the 2.5 minute mark. And I'm holding the 5-minute window to let people get their hands raised from when we started the meeting. So if anyone has anything to fill about 2 minutes with for the good of the order, any songs, any dances?
We could approve some minutes.
That actually is true. We do have minutes approval back on the end of our agenda, and I think we have plenty of time to do that. Your packet did have minutes from the April 27th meeting. Did anyone have any recommended changes or comments to those? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from April 27th?
I move that we approve the minutes from April 27th.
Moved by Eliza Kaczynski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Groves. All in favor of approving those minutes, please raise your hands. I'm seeing 13 in favor. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? And the minutes are approved. So perfect. Oh goodness, we still have time. we did that too fast. No one had comments on the minutes. Help me out here.
I will say that I appreciated the little bit of added detail that was included in the minutes.
Anybody got any bad dad joke?
Well, I was going to suggest the chair could just preview the agenda for folks.
That's fair. So after public comment, we have a presentation on our Safe Sleep Sites program, and then there's going to be a break. And then we'll have another presentation on the housing implementation pipeline, followed by an opportunity for the Budget Committee to discuss anything we've heard today or anything else we're thinking about the proposed budget. We'll start with that in a round robin format and then move on to second, potentially third rounds as needed. And that's pretty much the extent of the plan. So pretty straightforward, couple presentations, and then we get to chat. And I do have 5:41 now, so we can go ahead and begin public comment. How many people do we have signed up?
Hello, we only have 2 people signed up for public comment tonight. First, this will be Jacob True, followed by Chris Hecht. Jacob, I've promoted you to panelist. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hello there. Can you hear me? Good. My name is Jacob True, and I'm a resident of the city in Ward 1. And I just want to say that the budget as presented is very well constructed. And as I was reading through it, I noticed that the police budget has been increased by 20%. I was like, oh, wow, I wonder if that's going to our nationally recognized Cahoots program, because they've been doing such good work, and I certainly know that they need a lot of funding. I took a little bit deeper dive into it, and it looks like just a fraction of that's going to Cahoots, and the rest of it's going to expand police presence on our streets. I think adding more folks with guns to our streets isn't the correct tack for the city to take. The city's budget is a moral document, and saying that more police on the streets, more folks with guns around isn't the right way to go for it. We should instead expand and improve upon our nationally recognized Cahoots program. The city of Portland, for example, their crisis response team, which is run out of the city, not through a nonprofit, has recently been expanded to cover the entire city, and they're in the works to expand it to be 24 hours a day. I think we should expand on that that momentum, and where we had been leading in crisis response, the city of Eugene, we're now starting to lag behind our neighbors. Again, the additional funding to police could be used on a great number of other things that are of importance to the members of our community, including achieving our climate goals, housing the unhoused, our unhoused neighbors that don't have a permanent place to live. We could consider using the funds towards that. Housing would be a much better thing to use than increasing enforcement, levying fines on folks that already are having a hard time to live. Increasing tree cover in our urban center, universal childcare, any number of things. There's a lot of priorities and a lot of ways that we can show the morality of our city, rather than just spending it on yet more police and yet more carceral enforcement. Appreciate the time that you've given me here. And yeah, if any folks are interested in helping out with that, take a look at livefirsteugene.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Hecht, and that would conclude our public comment. Chris, I promoted you to panelist. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
All right, can y'all hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Great. Can I request an accessibility accommodation, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Can someone just say something or clap or snap their fingers when I'm at 30 seconds? Because I can't see the timer.
Yes.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Well, hi, I'm Chris Hecht, Executive Coordinator of Whitebird Clinic, and I'm here today to thank y'all for the funding for Cahoots that's included in the CSI budget. The $161K allocated will allow Whitebird to support Cahoots in providing the 36 hours a day of contracted services without losing money. We've been running Cahoots at a deficit budget for quite a few years now, so this is really a milestone, and I appreciate the budget committee and the city manager for taking this step that really helps Whitebird offer this service to our community members. So breaking even is a great goal that we're on the way to achieving. But we're really also up against a really critical issue around wages for Kahoot staff. Currently, Kahoot's base wage is $18 an hour. And frankly, there are starting fast food jobs in town that are competitive with that don't require licensure or certification, and certainly don't require 500 hours of training prior to starting. So we're really not having a very competitive wage is presenting tremendous challenges for Kahoots as we strive to provide the service to community members that they deserve. Remember that Kahoots is only called when someone is in crisis. So quite often Kahoot staff members are working to support people who may be experiencing the very worst day of their entire life.
30 seconds.
Thanks. In that moment, community members deserve expert professional care, and our request for an additional $170,000 will allow us to attract, train, and retain the staff members our community deserves. And I'm from Ward 1. Sorry I didn't start with that.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone who came to speak to us tonight. That's got us well ahead of schedule versus what we had allotted. So we've got a nice little window, but let's for now just move on into our safe sleep sites presentation.
Thank you, Budget Committee members. I'm Peter Shivan. I'm the manager of the City of Eugene's Homeless Services. And if I could share my screen, maybe I can already. Let me check that out. Perfect. All right. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about the work the city has been doing to expand our community's shelter capacity and provide an update on the Safe Sleep Site program. Before I get into the Safe Sleep Sites specifically, I did want to note that this program is embedded within the city's expansion of our alternative shelter work. And that work is comprised of the programs listed here. So rest stops, microsites, the overnight parking program, and now Safe Sleep Sites. For some context, I've included a running count of our shelter capacity since the beginning of COVID until now. So if you look at the table on the screen, you'll see in January of 2020, our community, or the City of Eugene, had 877 shelter units. And I use the term units here to recognize that there are occasions where a couple may occupy an individual unit. We certainly see that in some of our Conestoga huts and pallet shelters. So as I said, January of 2020, we had 877 units. In April of 2020, so roughly 3 months later, we were down to 666. So that decline of a little more than 200 in the early phase of the pandemic was largely due to reductions in the Dawn to Dawn program and the Eugene mission. Currently, we have 1,047 shelter units in Eugene, and that number has grown as a result of the rest stop expansion, which I'll touch on briefly shortly, as well as Lane County's work on the emergency motel voucher program. They also have set up some pallet shelter sites around town. And then of course, the opening of 310, 410, and Everyone Village Safe Sleep Sites. Over the next 3 months, we expect that number to expand by just over an additional 100. And that expansion is attributed to the opening of the 75-bed navigation center. We're looking at that opening now in early August, as well as the openings of the Rosa Safe Sleep Site and the Chase Commons Safe Sleep Site. And before we get into the shelters specifically, again, I think it's useful to look at the distinctions between two categories of shelters. And because I think the differences between those categories have implications for our strategic investments moving forward. And the distinction largely arrives through the means by which people enter into them. So a programmatic shelter is a shelter that has a program and it cultivates a community culture for residents. And so potential applicants need to affirm that community culture prior to entry. Not only do they affirm the community culture, they also commit to engaging with various program components offered by the provider to develop a plan that moves them towards increased stability. And when I talk about increased stability, we're looking for improvements in an individual's housing situation, their connections to physical, mental, and behavioral health supports. We'd like to see improvement in their level of income, whether that's through benefits enrollment or employment. And then finally, community connections. So folks who are entering into a programmatic shelter commit to the program, commit to the culture, commit to developing a plan and working on it. What that means is the smooth operations of that shelter are less reliant on staff. Maybe that's not the best way to say it. That residents also contribute to the smooth operation of the shelter. And so if you look at this table, the staffing model for a programmatic shelter is what we call 24/7 responsiveness. They may not have a staff on site 24/7, but they have identified staff who can respond if needed 24/7. The other piece that's important to note about programmatic shelters is the outcomes that are related to positive exits. And so when we talk about positive exits, we're talking about folks who, when they leave, are not returning to an unsheltered situation. And so that could be housing, that could be family reunification, or that could be inpatient treatment. That's typically what we see when we're talking about positive exits. And then the cost for programmatic shelters tend a little bit less than emergency shelter. And that largely arrives because residents therein they are reciprocally accountable to each other. So it's not just staff enforcing rules, but it's also, there's an atmosphere of positive peer pressure in programmatic shelters that reduces the need for staffing, which consequently reduces the need for dollars. Conversely, emergency shelters are primarily places that people can go when they are looking for refuge from the elements. They're drop-in programs, and so if the shelter has a bed available, somebody could access it that night. There's no commitment to engage in services, and it's really a rule-based culture, and so they tend to be staff-heavy. So staff can help residents navigate the shelter rules, as well as support interpersonal dynamics that may crop up when you have a lot of people who don't know each other in a difficult situation. So for emergency shelters, what we're seeing in Eugene is a 5 to 15% rate of positive exits. And that's not surprising in that folks who enter into emergency shelters haven't already made the decision, or that might be a gross generalization, have not necessarily made the decision to commit to some program that increases their stability. Often they're short-lived. In looking at the data from last year, about 50% of emergency shelter residents stay there 2 weeks or less. And then there's cost implications for an emergency shelter. Since it is so reliant on staff to manage the interpersonal dynamics they're in, they tend to be staff heavy. They tend to be more expensive than programmatic shelters. Oh. So moving towards the rest stop and microsite expansion. So beginning in the summer of 2020, City Council directed staff to expand our rest stop program. Historically, the city's support for rest stops has been through the Community Safety Initiative, and up until FY23, that amount has been $50,000. The limited nature of that funding amount meant that our support was largely limited to grants to providers to make infrastructure improvements to their existing sites. With council's direction to expand rest stops, combined with federal CARES dollars, this meant that the city could work with providers to finance operations at an additional 5 rest stops and 5 microsites. While we have funding for this expansion in FY23 due to an increase in the CSI allocation to rest stops, as well as unspent FY22 dollars, we continue to explore funding options for these programs in FY24 and beyond. So this fiscal year, 190 people have been sheltered, 50% of the leavers, so 34 people left a rest stop or a microsite so far in FY22. Those 34 people exited to more stable living environments. This is a slight decline in the outcome data from our historical data related to rest stops, and we attribute this largely to the increased need for mental and behavioral health supports for this population. So finally, on to safe sleep sites. So the Safe Sleep Site program is made possible through collaborations between service providers, Lane County, local businesses, other public agencies, and the city of Eugene. The city assumes control of the sites through ownership or lease agreements, and then develops the site in consultation with site operators. So we do work with operators to refine where structures go, how the paths run through the site, what the paths are made of, to make sure that we address any accessibility issues that may crop up. And then the city contracts with providers to operate the site. And when we talk about operations, what we mean by that is managing intake and exits if necessary, making sure the utilities are on site and in good working order, making sure those utilities are paid for, supporting that community culture that exists within the site, and holding space for service providers if they're not of the same agency as the operator. So the Safe Sleep Site project is funded with one-time ARPA dollars. All of the sites have heat, water, electricity, showers, bathrooms, food or access to a kitchen, and Wi-Fi. That's the work that the city pays for. And then on top of that, Lane County has layered dollars to contract with providers to deliver services on site through emergency solution coronavirus relief dollars. It's important to note that the operational dollars are one time, and we have yet to identify dollars to continue operations beyond FY23. Also importantly, Lane County has not identified a source of funding to continue service provision after September 30th of this year. So we currently have 3 safe sleep sites up and running. The first one is at 310 Garfield. That is property that we leased from LTD. It has a capacity of 55 vehicles within which people can live. We have learned that many of the RVs that are out in the street that serve as living space for folks are also accompanied by a vehicle so that those folks can drive around. We have space at this site for vehicles if residents have to, so they may be living in an RV but then have a car to go to work. I'm trying to see, I don't think we have it on this picture, but many of the residents at 310 Garfield actually are employed and during the day are out at their place of employment and then return to 310 to sleep. A second safe sleep site we have is 410 Garfield that's leased from a local business. It's a warehouse within which we have individual tents. You can see some of the tents in the background of this picture here. That opened in February of 2022. And so we're just beginning to get enough data to begin thinking about how it's working. But all of the sites are full in with waiting lists. And so we do know that we have provided an attractive option for some people to find shelter. Our third safe sleep site is Everyone Village, which is a really cool project. This is out in West Eugene off of 13th and Bailey Hill. Arlen Rexius provided the location at no charge. Everyone Church has a lease with Rexius, a zero cost lease for 5 years. On this site, there are 24 structures, a combination of pallet shelters and tiny homes, as well as 17 RVs. And this site opened in December of 2021. They're hoping to expand toward 100 individuals over the summer. And we have built into our budget dollars to accommodate that expansion. We've worked out a nice contractual arrangement with Everyone Village, whereby we pay a rate based on occupancy. So as they expand, rather than doing contract amendments, we can evolve our compensation with them appropriately. So in these 3 sites, we've sheltered 302 people. And I believe 67 have left, none from Everyone Village. The 67 are split between 310 and 410, which is what we typically see with emergency shelters. As I was talking about earlier, they tend to have a less stable population, but about 68% of the initial residents at those locations remain. So we're paying attention to how that evolves to make sure that we can adjust programming as necessary. On the horizon, this slide always challenges me because I think I've presented it 3 or 4 times and I keep saying, oh, I think it's going to be next week. I think it's going to be next week, but there are a few more I's to dot and a few more T's to cross to make sure that all parties in the agreement are on the same page. The land here is owned by Square One Villages, and it currently is operating a microsite there. As it transitions to a safe sleep site, there'll be 40 pallet structures on site and will be operated by Square One Villages, by Carry It Forward. And funding for services at this location is provided by Lane County, again, through September 2022. The site is also being evaluated as an affordable housing site. On the horizon, so Council approved Chase Commons as a safe sleep site late summer, early fall of 2021. When it was approved, we were unable to identify an operator for that site. That combined with the scurrying to get 310, 410, Everyone Village, and Rosa up and running meant that this site receded a little bit into the background. But we have identified Carry It Forward as an operator. And so we're looking to re-engage the surrounding community here in the next couple of weeks. The site will have 18 pallet structures as well as a pallet bathroom shower combo that's ADA accessible. And a cool thing about this site is Carry It Forward approached the city suggesting they operate a site for medically vulnerable folk, which, as we looked at the capacity for our community to shelter those folks, we're really lacking there. And so we certainly were intrigued by the idea. Given the nature of service dollars, we wanted to make sure that if this was going to serve a medically vulnerable population, we had confidence that services would be provided to that population as appropriate. We subsequently approached the healthcare subcommittee of the Poverty and Homelessness Board. They were similarly excited about the possibility, and we're currently collaborating with healthcare providers to develop a service model for the site and related funding agreements. So that's kind of what's happened, what's currently happening. As we look into the future, I kind of hinted at this earlier, we're going to be doing a performance evaluation of the safe sleep sites. Not only the individual sites, what do their exits look like? Are people staying there in achieving indicators of increased stability in those 4 domains I talked about: housing, health, or wellness, income, and community connection. We also want to develop an understanding of how these safe sleep sites function within the overall homeless service system. And so, for example, one of the things we would like to see is if it turns out an individual is not finding success in a particular site, whether it's a safe sleep site, a rest stop, or a shelter, we have options available to them for transfer so that they don't return to the street. So that would be something that we're looking at. We're also looking at, do particular sites develop characteristic needs related to, say, housing navigation? You know, if we have distinct cultures kind of percolating at different sites, there's probably customization that can happen in service provision that will help us more effectively get the right services to the right people at the right time. So those are the kind of things we'll be looking at as we evaluate the safe sleep sites and our overall shelter network. We'll also be exploring the potential for expanding the program. And that could mean one of several things. That could mean expanding the capacity at particular sites. I've already mentioned Everyone Village is looking to expand more than double over the summer. It might include exploring additional potential sites. It might include developing non-traditional partnerships. So we know that the business community is expressing interest in contributing to some of the solutions to our homeless challenge. And there may be opportunities to bring some of that expertise into the program. I think about things like workforce development. Everyone Village is already doing some work in that area. I also think about things like organizational capacity building. You know, we have some really dynamic and innovative businesses in town, and we can't afford to let the opportunity go by for partnering with those folks. So those are the kinds of things that we'll be looking at in FY23. So that's kind of a quick overview. And my last slide here says questions. So I'm going to stop sharing. I assume you all can remember that if you have questions, I'll try and answer them.
Peter, before we go to questions, Matt had a few things that he wanted to add around some of the funding as it relates to fiscal year 24 and what we're trying to accomplish.
Oh, sure.
Right.
Thanks, Christy, and thanks, Peter. I really appreciate that presentation. It's a complex web of funding that we're trying to put together to support this work. So a couple of things I did want to clarify. This FY23 proposed budget actually does fund all of the existing safe sleep sites and actually the microsites and rest stops through FY24. And the way that that is done, not only with the one-time direct allocation of ARPA dollars, but with the $5 million that we got in general fund that came from the state of Oregon. So that is wrapped in the FY23 budget. That's just one thing that I wanted to clarify.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. Does anyone have any questions? We'll go hand raise for this. And I only ask that you keep questions specifically about that presentation at this time. Ryan?
Thank you. Yeah, I actually have a couple. So just trying to get a better understanding, because it seemed like the programmatic shelters were, really cheap and really effective, and emergency shelters were, maybe not so much. So I'm just curious, what kind of what barriers are we facing to get folks into these programmatic shelters? Because it seems like they're cheaper and really effective. Just kind of curious about that connection there.
Sure, thanks for the question. So some of the programmatic shelters are really cheap, and I'll point to the rest stops as an example there. The rest stops, they cost around $8 per person per night. The reason they cost so little is because they rarely have staff on site. The reason they rarely have staff on site is because they spend a lot of time finding the right people to bring into the community. And so one of the things we discovered with our rapid expansion is that our rest stops were hovering far too long in the 30–40% full because they couldn't find the right people to fit in with the existing community. So at its cheapest, rest stops are our cheapest. They are also our most successful in generating positive exits. They also, we've stretched them a little bit, but they also have historically worked with folks who are easier to support into employment, easier to support into housing. And so it's a different population. So they would be on the cheap end of a programmatic shelter. Everyone Village and the Rosa site are going to be significantly more expensive, while not as expensive as an emergency shelter. It's similar in that the folks who are coming in have already decided, I'm going to move in the direction of case management, housing navigation, the various system components. They have committed to living in a community and have a different sense of, what's the word? The easiest way to say they live in a community, right? They're neighbors, and they're trying to address what they need to address as individuals, and also recognize that they're connected to a group of people anywhere from 10 to 18 other folks who are relying on this location in order to do the work that they've identified for themselves. They do fill less quickly than emergency shelters, more quickly than a rest stop. And so those are the variables at play in these alternative shelter programs. Does that get you your answer?
It does, yeah. Kind of like, finding the right fit is a little bit harder than emergency shelters, I think, is what you're saying. And they're more prone to successful outcomes, probably. Right. Yeah, okay. And a follow-up, Mr. Chair, that's okay. Great. And your last kind of slide got me thinking. So recently, the legislature passed Future Ready Oregon. It's a huge program for getting really innovative folks, ways of getting folks connected, especially with wraparound. Are we tapping into the monies coming into Lane Workforce Partnership and thinking about ways of getting these folks, the wraparound services and career training they need to get, these successful jobs that produce these positive outcomes?
So city staff currently are spending all of our energy getting sites set up. Everyone village is connected to that work. And once we get the site set up, so that's the part that we really want to invest into, is how can we build out these sites so that they provide multiple paths and out and in terms of resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Catherine and then Councillor Groves.
I gotta do the double mute. I have a handful, so it's short, but a couple of questions. I think actually the first one is, Matt, could you say again what you said before? Because my brain was like not quite tracking, and I want to make sure that I understand what you were saying.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Catherine. I want to make sure that it's clear too. So as you probably all know, that in addition to the one-time funding that we got from the federal government through ARPA, we also, through the state legislature, got $5 million to support expansion of, we'll just use our program's name, Safe Sleep Sites. We also got another $750,000 to support sanitation costs in the community. So we took that funding as well as the ARPA funding and put together a package that would extend the unhoused services really just for support of Safe Sleep Sites through FY24. Everything else you're seeing in the budget around unhoused is just FY23, but for Safe Sleep Sites, we supported those, including microsites and the rest stops, and we had a modest, kind of based on what Peter was saying about expansion and a couple of the, or at least at one of our existing providers, and then expecting a couple more sites to come online. We had that modest expansion that would be supported all the way through the end of FY24.
Okay, cool, thank you. If we, as a follow-up, could we get a list, or make myself at least get a list of sort of which of the sites are included in that time frame? Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
Okay, my other questions are for Peter. First was, I wanted to check and see if I'm assuming that the slide deck that was shared can be shared out with committee members afterwards so that we can look at that. And I'm wondering, kind of in thinking about the distribution of the different types of beds that are available, how, at this point, how does it feel like that's mapping to sort of the level of need among unsheltered folks right now? Are we sort of, do we feel like we're kind of calibrating right, or are we heading in one direction more than another?
That's a great question, Catherine. I think, well, the short answer is we don't have enough of any of it. And then the less, the real answer is we have to see how these things function, and they just haven't been up and running long enough to evaluate how they're functioning, because each of those, even within the programmatic shelters, they're subtly different. And then it also depends on what you're trying to achieve with the shelters, right? So there's a desperate need for a shelter that somebody can walk up to any day and say, can I stay here tonight? There's a desperate need for that. Those are really expensive and they don't have great outcomes. There's a less extensive need for programmatic shelters, but they have better outcomes, and in the long term are a better investment of city dollars. And so we're still trying to calibrate. You know, I think because the shelter system is so overwhelmed, the calibration is not, do we need more of alternative shelters or more programmatic shelters? It's how are these things working right now? And then once we have a better idea of how they're working right now, then we can make strategic decisions around what we set up next. I think it's important that we have a variety of programmatic shelters so that we have enough diversity in the programmatic shelters so that we have a good understanding of how they work. Emergency shelters are, you know, I won't say that they're all the same, but they're less different than programmatic shelters.
And is there, have there been conversations or kind of thoughts around how for folks to be accessing these different sites, either kind of, you know, facilitating or coordinating more through coordinated entry process, or sort of like ways, you know, so people aren't having to go to each organization and fill out an application, and just kind of trying to make it easier for the users who are trying to find a place?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. So James Ewell, who you know, the coordinated entry and outreach coordinator for Lane County, has committed to developing a cognito form for centralized referral. He's trying to figure out where in the county there's capacity to go through applications that come in that way. And so we're continuing to negotiate around that. We definitely want folks connected through coordinated entry. And then as well, as once we get these sites set up, we've told our operators that we'd like to have regular, essentially like case conferencing meetings amongst the shelter providers, so that we can make sure that there's good understanding amongst the providers around what the different kinds of shelters are offering and what people have tended to do well therein. And then as well, you know, and just continue to learn from each other. We do have in our contract that all of these providers are using HMIS, so we're connected to the system. We're waiting to understand from the county where their capacity is to manage the referral process. Yeah, but those conversations are happening.
Okay, cool. I'm now chair of that PHB committee, so I think we'll be talking more moving forward.
Were you at the last meeting?
I was of the subcommittee, the coordinated entry committee.
The coordinated entry. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And I have one other question that's kind of a little more logistics oriented, which is, from what I remember, there was a pretty big chunk that was spent on site infrastructure, site leasing, sort of that like setup piece. And it looked like the two Garfield sites are leased. Kind of wondering what is like the long-term, if there is a long-term sort of intention or purpose with those sites, if we're anticipating that, given kind of the amount of resource that has gone into them.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Matt, you want to talk about this one?
Sure, thanks, Peter. So the LTD property, which we call 310 Garfield, so that's where the RV and car camping is currently set up as a safe sleep site, is one that we've been talking to LTD about. They have, well, it hasn't gone through their board. They have talked officially to surplus the property. They have been talking about surplusing the property. So that's one we've been talking to them about the potential to acquire. 410 Garfield, we haven't talked to the property owners about that. I think there's been some interest in that property from some of the nonprofit partners that we're working with in town, but there's not been any conversation about potential purchase of that property.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilor Groves and then followed by Liza and Raina.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Peter, for the presentation. I just wanted to add a little bit to this because I've spent a significant amount of my time since taking office in West Eugene, working on some of the challenges we've had with the unhoused. And I've been out there most days watching it and watching things develop and seeing what's working and what's not. And I can't emphasize enough, building on what Peter said, is the higher functioning the people are, the less management they need and the cheaper they are to help and the more we can help them. And then taking it back down on more of the entry level, the people that refuse to come into managed sites are some of the, it's out of that population that our biggest problems come from inversely. And just because somebody is not in a site doesn't mean it's not costing the city money. In fact, quite the opposite is true with managing behaviors and also with garbage and human waste cleanup, which is kind of a constant. And I know there's been literally hundreds of dump truck loads of debris hauled out of West Eugene and other places. So that's something that we need to keep in mind too, that just because, you know, we have these camps set up, there's still people that aren't in the camps, and those are cost centers for the city as well. And then I wanted to add one more thing. The business community has been a big help. They have stepped up. You can drive around a lot of West Eugene businesses and see where businesses have actually sponsored unhoused people on their private property and helping with the problem. Likewise, the faith-based community has been involved as well. Most churches in our area are sponsoring unhoused people on their properties. And in fact, I was just in a meeting on Monday with a faith-based leadership group with John Reese, our former city manager. And they're looking for an even bigger role to play beyond what they're already doing. And they have a lot of resources in the way of land. They've got human power to help with this. So this is an all hands on deck to try to solve this issue. And it's not just the city, it's not just the county. It's people out in our community that we need to be pulling together and working with. And that is going on right now, but I think it's important to understand that. So I just wanted to share those experiences and those observations I've had. And I'll even add, I still talk with our firefighters all the time. And although the problem has certainly grown since my days on the street, a lot of the individual calls are very much the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Eliza.
So thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for the work. It's, you know, having heard conversations on this for a long time, it's very gratifying to sort of see the pictures of the sites and the huts and all that sort of thing sort of coming together and expanding. I wanted to make sure I understood a couple of things, primarily about money topics. Did I hear when we were talking about how long this one-time funding was available for, has it been allocated to fiscal year 2024 or through? So are we talking July 2023 or July 2024 is when we won't have money allocated for this?
Yeah, so thanks, Eliza. I'll try to make sure it's clear. So for the unhoused service investments that you're seeing that are, you know, kind of one-time funding, for everything other than safe sleep sites and microsites and rest stops, it's through the end of FY23. For safe sleep sites, microsites, and rest stops, it's through the end of FY24.
Okay.
And the way that we can do that is through contracts to be able to encumber those funds in FY23 that would extend those operating contracts.
Okay. And then I think I know the answer to this, but when we're looking at our out-year forecasts, those assume that things that we've allocated as one-time money don't continue into the out years. Is that correct? I'm seeing a nod, so I will verbalize that nod.
Yeah, anything that's ARPA related funding or, you know, identified as one-time funding that's going to support these services would obviously drop off. Most of those funds end at the end of fiscal year 24.
Okay. And so when we're talking about needing $10 million worth of strategies to stabilize our budget, if we want these services to continue, it would be $10 million plus the cost of these services. Is that correct?
If we don't make any other changes to anything else, yes. But part of the purpose of going through the priority-based budgeting process is to try to really understand the cost of all of our programs and see if there's opportunities for places where we can partner or do things differently. So, but yes, and I think during the forecast presentation, Mauricio had a series of slides that started to show that gap getting bigger and bigger and bigger as you added back those one-time dollars.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Raina, and then I have John.
Hey there, I just have one clarifying question. So it was mentioned a couple of times that Lane County's funding for a couple of these sites, like the Rosa location, ends in September. And I just wanted to clarify what services exactly they were providing and how those services are going. What's the plan to cover those services once they're no longer there?
So the services are housing navigation, case management, and then there's a number of services that they'll call outreach, but it's a particular kind of outreach. So medical, mental health, and a little bit of behavioral health services through outreach dollars are what Lane County is currently providing. They're using ESG Emergency Solutions Grants dollars for that, and that ends September 30th, 2022. And we're in meetings every day trying to figure out, okay, how do we make sure that these services are delivered to the safe sleep sites so people can transition to a better living situation? But we don't have an answer to that question. Good to see you, Raina.
You too, Peter. The follow-up question for you. What's that amount of that grant? What's that monetary number that will now be missing?
So, I mean, it covers a lot more things than just the safe sleep sites. But what they're committing to safe sleep sites is, I believe, $440,000.
Thank you. That was my questions. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. And John.
Thank you. A couple questions, just kind of, I guess, 10,000 foot level questions. What's the overall scope of the problem, and what percentage are we actually helping of the homeless population? You talked about pretty long wait lists at some of the sites, but also that it was acknowledged that not everybody is necessarily wanting or in a place to receive the services that are available. Are we a quarter of the way there? Are we halfway there? Do we have any idea?
So there are 3,000 unhoused individuals in Eugene, the last data that I saw, and we have 1,100. I have to go back and look at my slide, but somewhere between 1,000 and 1,100 shelter beds.
So approximately a third. I guess this my second question kind of falls more into the legal side of it. Is memory serves, I forget if it was a state Supreme Court or federal court ruling that talked about not being able to move the homeless campers unless there was an alternate site for them to go to. How do you gauge when we've reached that point and that we are able to, for lack of a better term, more harshly or more directly address the negative behaviors of the certain individuals who have been problematic because there is a place for them to go to if they wanted to follow the rules? How do you navigate that, I guess, is my question.
I turn to the city attorney.
Well, that's a very multifaceted question. I will say that much. And I think part of it is not the case that you're referring to is the Boise case. It was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and it's really about criminally punishing for the act of sleeping. So it's not as nuanced as it's more nuanced than the way you're describing it. So you're talking about a criminal punishment for the act of sleeping or the or having or living. So it's not a one-to-one. The way we have it structured, the way we do things, we are 100% in compliance with the law as we move forward. And so we are not, what your budget decisions aren't needing to kind of gauge that as we do that. We would not be proposing to fund something or have something that would be contrary to that. So we're always, that's always a part of it. It's always on top of it. There's actually a new Oregon House bill. It's not new now. It's going to be coming into law within a year, 3115, that we're also going to need to gauge that will, that's around just our general prohibited camping provisions that's not necessarily a criminal punishment, but just generally, and we'll be gauging that. And if there is some adjustment that would need to happen within the budget, you can safely assume that would be absorbed into that and it would be reflected. So I know that didn't exactly answer your question, but it's a multifaceted and it's a complex area.
Right. And I guess I should just clarify, I'm not, proposing criminalizing the sleeping piece. It's the being able to address the prohibited camping and all that in a way, that we have enough alternate sites that are permissible that we're able to then a little bit more robustly address the illegal camping, and the problem areas, because there is a place. And maybe that's the answer. We're a third of the way there.
We do routinely have an inventory and have an understanding of how many beds are open and available. And that is part of when we do need to address a situation because of safety or other reasons or locations, we do have an understanding of where there are spaces available that people could go, whether it be at a dusk to dawn or a dawn to dawn or those sites. So it's part of what is happening, that case and all of the things around it, and our approach, it does include all of that.
Okay, yeah, and I understand pushing them from one site to another is expensive, and if we can be using those dollars to make more, sites, dusk to dawn or safe sleep sites or the little, micro communities, that seems like a better long-term use of the dollars. And so I'm just trying to grapple where we're at on that from an overall budget standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Clark.
Thank you, sir. Peter, thank you for all the information and for the report. Again, I know you've done this for council several times. It's quite a lot of information to absorb. Along the lines of what Catherine just said, I have asked this question at council before, but I want to make sure I'm asking it in the budget setting here as well. When I asked it last time at council, I got an answer that there were a few here and a few there sort of thing. Do you have any kind of idea how many beds that we provide regularly go unused? Of the 1,047, how many are filled every night?
So our emergency shelters, shelters that people could walk in and get a bed, are full almost every night. They will typically have vacancies between 3 and 5 each day, people who don't come back, but they're pretty full pretty much every night.
But there are vacancies.
One or two, or up to 5.
Okay. And on the more programmatic ones?
So our last count, I think we were about, of the programmatic shelters that we fund, we're about at 85% capacity now. That number has steadily increased over the course of the year. Again, working with our service providers and creating some incentives for them to move a little quicker to get people in has definitely improved their occupancy. They might say, or you could look at the data and say there's a cost to that in that they have more negative exits. But right now they're around 85% full.
So that's 75 beds, maybe. I don't remember.
85 beds full.
85 beds that go unused.
No, 15 that go unused.
15% or 15 beds?
There are 101 beds. So
got it. I understand now. Thank you, sir, very much.
Sure.
If we're only providing beds enough for 30% of the unhoused, and they're not all, and specifically with the short-term, very few rules situations, and they're not always full, and there isn't a line of people standing outside, why is that?
So they're pretty much always full. They have vacancies each day that then get absorbed as people stand in line at 2 o'clock to get in. Certainly that's the case for Dusk to Dawn. I'm less familiar with what's happening at the Mission. You know, I know that there are folks in the unhoused community that are resistant to going to the Mission. They, you know, for whatever reason, I don't want to project my thinking onto folks.
Not that we're not doing a wonderful job, because I believe we are, but are there those that are resistant to coming into any of our places? Any of them?
Oh, sure. Sure. It's a variety of reasons, you know, the same reasons that you know, similarly that we don't go to particular department stores because of whatever. It's not offering us what we're looking for.
Is that an important thing for us to study and figure out why?
Absolutely.
I would think so too. From my perspective, and I'm uneducated as deeply as you are, that's why I'm asking you. It would seem to me that my recollection is we require some rules. You can't do drugs. You can't, you know, we require some rules of all of the places we offer, and the Mission does as well. And so I would think that has something to do with it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I liked the way you described the successes of particular types of programs. It's my contention that when people want to get well, we offer a vast array of services that meet that need and that people can begin on the road to getting well. But it is my contention that the majority of folks living unhoused don't necessarily want to get well when there's an opportunity to do so. That's the point of me asking all these questions. Is there, while we're providing this opportunity for people, what would you suggest that the city do for those who have not made the decision that they want to get well? What would you suggest we do to do more? If most folks unsheltered, if what I'm suggesting is true, don't want to get well and live within the framework of expected behaviors and rules, what should we do?
Yeah, I mean, so I thought about this a lot, Mike, and I don't have a great answer for you, but when I think about it, and I think about the role of the city there as it relates to homelessness, and there's a work in progress. So you're getting this off, not quite off the top of my head. But when I think about the role of cities, I think it has a responsibility to catch people who are falling. So that, and I think about that in terms of prevention, right? So as we recognize that we have a population in danger of losing housing, we have a responsibility to do something to intervene there, and that's usually the cheapest place to act.
Sure.
We also have a responsibility to support people who are reaching, and I think that's what you're talking about. Right?
Well, I'm asking, what do we do about the people who won't reach?
Right. And then we also need to provide infrastructure for folks for folks who are here, whether they're unhoused or they're visitors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're serious about not criminalizing homelessness, there needs to be infrastructure in place that every human being needs to live. And obviously that's $1 million question. What's the appropriate amount of infrastructure? How many bathrooms? How many, water, what,
but
all of this stuff.
If people don't want to take advantage of that and live within rules, then what? So
if people don't want to live within rules, we need to have some mechanism to affirm the social contract, right? And I think where we're struggling is, and I think we're struggling in this area as a country. And with good reason, we look at homelessness as an aberration and a problem to solve. And because we begin there, it generates particular kinds of strategies. We assume people need these kinds of things. If instead, what I think is real is that homelessness is here, right? And so our social contract needs to come to grips with the fact that people are going to be living outside for the certainly the near term. And so how do we develop infrastructure that recognizes that enables people who live outside to live outside, and at the same time have this level of accountability that I know it's important to all of us. And we don't have a great answer. And I don't think our conversation has been broad enough to really get to an answer. Otherwise, we're stuck with, if you're living outside, you're gonna be a criminal because you have to do all sorts of things that it's kind of illegal to do outside.
Yeah, I very much want to criminalize bad behavior, but not status.
Right.
And, somebody has a home, doesn't have a home. That's not something we should criminalize. But behavior is.
Absolutely.
Bad behavior and antisocial behavior is. And I would just say, I think we need to focus on that difference. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think Shivan can wrap this up and bring us to our break.
Hi. Thank you so much for the presentation. One thing I didn't notice, and I'm curious if you might be able to help me with the information, is do you guys collect demographic info like, race, sex, stuff like that? And if so, have you been able to kind of discern like a large problematic area or the most, for lack of a better term, suffering?
Yes. Well, so a couple of things that I think would be useful for everyone to know is the data on homelessness is primarily gathered through, it's called HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. And that database is carried by the county. And so I don't have real-time data in the way that I would like. But what I can say is that there is a great deal of suffering related to mental and behavioral health issues. We're woefully short in being able to deliver those services to our whole community, not just folks who are unhoused, but certainly that is something that we see more than regularly.
Chair, can I ask a follow-up question?
Of course.
And so, Peter, is there like, I'm more thinking demographic info, like I hear a lot of times about kids that are homeless, that are having to go to school out of their car and stuff like that. Like, do you collect age or sex or race sort of data?
So HMIS, the county does collect that data. When it comes to youth, it's a little bit misleading because what drives the categories for the HMIS system is HUD. And what HUD counts as homeless misses young people who may be couch surfing with friends. That's probably the biggest miss. And so if you look at HMIS data around unhoused youth, I don't have the number off the top of my head. I think at last count it was maybe in the 400s across the county. But if you talk to school districts, it's much higher than that. They're closer to the kids. They know their living situations. And, you know, while HUD would count a kid who's crashing with his friend's family as housed, the insecurity of that living situation brings with it a lot of the challenges an unhoused youth have. And so it's not, we don't have great data on youth. However, Lane County just received I think it was a little over a $3 million grant to develop a community plan around youth homelessness. And so my expectation is that we'll have better data and we'll see some new strategies emerging in certainly the next year related to youth homelessness.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Peter. I think that was extremely illuminating. I have one question, and that is, since we've had the changeover in administrations at the federal level, is there any funding that will be coming from HUD directly to cities to deal with these issues, as opposed to going to the states and the counties who are statutorily responsible for health and human services? What I'm asking is not are we going to get any kind of additional funding for health and human services per se, but to look at the overall impacts that this is having on our community as far as our infrastructure is concerned. And as a couple of other counselors and budget committee members alluded to earlier, the need for resources to be able to do cleanup and other associated issues that arise out of homelessness.
Councilor Evans, to be honest with you, I'm not aware of any. That being said, it's not where I've spent a ton of time of late. So I'll do a bit of research and I can provide whatever I find back to this committee.
Yeah, that would be helpful. If there's some additional attention that's coming to cities, I haven't seen it, but I'd like to see what is potentially on the table for us in terms of relief at the federal level.
Thank you. And I see Councillor Groves is looking for a second round. I wasn't clear whether Councillor Clark was as well, or yes. So Councillor Clark then is first and then Councillor Groves.
Thank you, sir. Peter, I had just one more question that I just thought of. If our municipal court judges were willing to order as a mandatory part of the conditions for release and or sentencing, if they were willing to mandate that someone living on the river, living somewhere not in one of our city shelters, were to live in one type or other of our city shelters, is that, from a program standpoint, is that something that you think you could build something that accommodates?
Look, I'm a former community center manager, and I believe that with the right people and the right resources, you can shape an environment that people want to be in. Right. So at the conceptual level, I think it's possible. I think, operationalizing that aspiration would be a heck of a challenge.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And would not be cheap.
Right. I get that on the spectrum of what you presented before, that it's probably become the most expensive when they don't have a choice and they maybe even don't want to be there, but the court mandates they be there. Is there a scale issue there? I mean, in terms of sizes, how would you approach something like that? Because I like the idea as something we as a city council speak more deliberately with our municipal judge about over time.
You know, that's not my area of expertise, and you know, anything that I said here would be a wild guess. You know, what I would start doing is getting to know people. My feeling is you build environments based on the people who are going to be living in there and their life experience, and it's not my life experience, and so to do something like that, that's where I would start, and it would be tiny at first, and then finding people who can, you know, staff that kind of environment is a challenge. Our providers are currently challenged, as Chris was saying when he was talking about cahoots. Our operators are challenged in finding staff for the sites that we currently have. So, you know, I never believe something's impossible. I try not to be unrealistic around what's needed to move towards possibilities.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you. Mia, did you have something you want to jump in on this with?
Just really briefly, because I know we need to move on. I just want to, and we can provide you more detail in writing, Counselor Clark, but want to be clear that through our community court program, which the judge is very engaged in and provides some form of sentencing, in that program, we often connect folks with service providers to include the safe sleep sites and other emergency shelters. So they're very often, when there's an appropriate fit, they are often cited into community court and then connected with those services. And again, I'll be brief. I know we need to move on. So thank you.
And I appreciate that, but I want to make sure to draw the distinction between offered this service and mandated to live there. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to put a cap on this round after Councillor Grove. So you really will take us into the break.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to be brief. I just wanted to respond to some of the questions about youth. A really good source of information for that's Megan Schultz at 15th Night. In fact, I had coffee with her and Commissioner Farr this morning talking about this very issue of getting back further in the pipeline and the need for emergency homes that detached homeless youth can be placed into. There's a vetting process for that, but I plan to bring that to the faith-based community as well. But it's still the number of youth between, and I heard this number earlier in the year, between Springfield School District, Bethel, and 4J is around 1,000 kids that are in this unstable, not necessarily homeless, but some are. It's amazing the number that just get abandoned. The parents just up and leave and the kid, you know, is here by themselves. So it is a problem. I think those are numbers we should track. You know, if we really want to make a difference in the future, it's getting back further in the pipeline, and that starts with our youth. So that's something I want to use this platform. People at home listening, members of this committee, there is a need for emergency shelter, but also ongoing foster care for some of these kids that just need a chance in life. So I want to make that pitch. Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. So excellent presentation, excellent discussion, everyone. We did a great job of getting rid of the ahead of schedule chunk we had. We're now 10 minutes past where we were scheduled to take this break. So good job using our time. And I will see you back here at 7:10 for our next presentation. Thank you. For people who may have stepped away from their computers, just hearing the words welcome back sometimes helps. And with that ping, by all means, do go ahead and start sharing. It is time for our housing implementation pipeline presentation.
Great, I'll get that shared. Does everybody see the slide with the houses?
That's what I see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Amanda Noble Flannery, Senior Analyst in Community Development. For this presentation, I'm representing a cross-city collaboration that includes planning, the City Manager's Office, Building and Permit Services, Public Works Engineering, the City Attorney's Office, and Central Finance. I'm excited to give you a short, about 7-minute overview of the housing implementation pipeline. Then a small collection of us will be available to answer questions. Tonight, I'll review the HIP creation process, the purpose of the HIP. I'll highlight the goals and review the next steps. After implementing other key housing tools and strategies work, we were able to bring to life another of the housing tools and strategies recommendations for a housing implementation strategy. We kicked off the idea for the HIP with Council in early 2021. We provided updates and collected feedback from Council in the fall. During November and December, and building off of the extensive public engagement of the housing tools and strategies work, we presented the draft to various advisory groups who expressed their support. And Council approved the HIP this past January. The HIP provides a roadmap, benchmarks, and an order of operations, an internal work plan that pulls all of our housing efforts, including for the unhoused part of our community, under one roof with established goals and metrics. We recognize that continuing on our path of siloed and disconnected solutions wasn't sustainable and wasn't going to be a sufficient response to a problem of this significance and urgency. This continuum is at the core of the HIP. The continuum lens reveals housing as a system, meaning the goals, programs, and services across the continuum relate to and impact one another, allowing community members to move through the continuum as they are able. The 3 focus areas of the HIP are various groupings of the housing continuum bubbles, shown in those gray bars under the bubbles on this slide. The homelessness focus area is both of the homelessness bubbles, covering community members who are unsheltered and sheltered. Income qualified housing is the affordable housing and moderate income housing bubbles, both of which is housing where people have to verify income eligibility before moving into the units. And overall housing supply is the income qualified bubbles plus market rate housing. The HIP establishes goals across the entire continuum of housing. These goals are reinforced with immediate actions and sustained impacts planned in 2- and 5-year increments. I'll share a high-level summary, starting with the 2-year goal highlights. For homelessness, 250 new spaces at safe sleep sites, and with our partners, completing the emergency shelter and navigation center, adding 75 low barrier shelter beds in a permanent facility. For income qualified, supporting developers to preserve and construct a specific number of income qualified units with a specific focus on increasing affordable rental and home ownership opportunities, investing in the development of new permanent supportive housing units for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. And with the City Fee Assistance Council approved this past December, our goal is to secure the opening of 280 income qualified units and support an additional 90 units that won't receive other city support. For overall housing supply, one of the tasks, pending additional resources, is to create an anti-displacement plan to achieve equitable housing access and benefit the health for all people in our community. Moving on to the 5-year highlights. For homelessness, participate in implementation of an integrated regional support system of homelessness services and cultivate non-traditional partnerships that support people experiencing homelessness. For income qualified, by the end of the 5-year period, our goals are to support preservation of 325 affordable housing units, support the opening of 835 new affordable housing units, meet the TAC goal for 263 new permanent supportive housing units, and support 129 units of mixed income housing. For overall housing supply, these goals overlap with the previous goals for income qualified housing and are for across the community and across housing types. The goal is to issue permits for the construction of 6,000 housing units and to increase the amount of housing downtown by 50%, an increase of over 1,000 units. And throughout the work of the HIP, to embed racial equity lens processes to create more equitable outcomes. Council approved the HIP in January, as I said, and the HIP period is for July 1 of this year to June 30th of 2027. Leading up to July, staff are continuing to work on specifics of implementation, including staffing, advancing initial policy initiatives such as renter protections and downtown housing, and continuing related work, including growth monitoring, climate action, and homelessness. The HIP includes built-in review periods whereby staff will bring updated information to council. The first one will be after year 2. The timeline in Appendix A of the HIP shows the potential policy and program exploration. Many of them will only be possible with additional resources. Decisions related to authorization and funding of programs will continue to be made through regular budget and other processes. The proposed FY23 budget has funding that contributes to starting several of the state mandated planning projects that are listed in Appendix A of the HIP. And the proposed FY23 budget also helps us with the first year of staffing with funds for a HIP analyst to do the essential work to coordinate city efforts and resources, track progress, and identify areas for improvement as we move forward. With the HIP, we're making a rapid turn away from the status quo of separate projects and programs towards a new trajectory of a coordinated systems approach. We recognize that the path charted in the HIP is based on what we know today, as well as the resources the city has available. It certainly won't solve all the issues we will confront, and we will need to do more as we learn more. The benefit of the HIP is that it does allow us to bring in other strategies and resources as we progress. The only thing we can say for sure is that we know things will change. There will be new problems and there will be new ideas and resources. The HIP provides a framework to help us accommodate changes and be more responsive to our housing needs, while also maintaining our responsibility to the community. And with that, we're here to answer your questions.
Thank you so much. Do we have some questions from the committee? Ryan.
I like just going first and get my questions out of the way. I was just curious, for income qualified housing, what is the threshold we use? Is there any poverty level thresholds? Just curious about what threshold we use for income qualified.
Income qualified housing is defined in the HIP from 0% area median income all the way to 100% area median income.
Perfect, thank you.
And Catherine.
You spoke to this just a little bit at the end, but I was kind of curious if there's any sense of the scope of like what financial resources from the city kind of look like in terms of implementing this, either sort of like short term or over the long term, and if there has been any thought around like whether that's likely to happen through some of the existing pathways like the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and or sort of through other maybe new ways of providing financial support.
Yeah, so Appendix B, I'm just making sure. Yeah, Appendix B provides a 5-year financial forecast for the HIP period. And it includes the existing or forecasted resources. And the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is one of those. And I can put the link, I don't know if you were provided with the HIP, but I can put the link to the HIP and Appendix B in the chat, if that would be helpful.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
And Eliza.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the work on this. It's been a few weeks since I've read the HIP, so I'm going to probably not be able to provide a specific example of what I was talking about. But I noticed when reading it that there were a number of places where it said, you know, additional funding will need to be allocated in order for us to accomplish this. And I know that there is some resources for some of the state mandated planning and some of the other things that are included in this budget. Do we have a sense of how much of that additional funding we've kind of already found since the HIP was originally produced, or any place where it says we're going to need to find additional funding, we still need to find additional funding?
Alyssa, you're muted.
Sitting here all night muted. Good evening, Alyssa Hansen with the Planning Division. Thanks for your question, Eliza. There is a request for $400,000 in the budget. And as you heard the city manager speak to a couple of weeks ago, that's really only a portion of what we need for the planning projects for the next fiscal year. Some of it will be, you know, through staff we already have, and we're also hopeful to be getting money from the state. They have some money that they'll be granting for some of the state mandated projects as well. For upcoming years, we'll still need additional funds for planning projects, and I'll let Amanda speak to other projects.
Thank you. And I saw, Will, you had unmuted, so maybe you want to add some more.
Hi, I'm Will Dowdy in Community Development. And I can just add in, I think that like planning, well, I guess I should back up and just say that one of the things that we have done with the HIP, and you get a sense of this as you start to look at the goals and you look at the pieces that come together in it, is that you see that it's a combination of a wide variety of projects, including work that we have already been doing, new standards and goals that we've set for ourselves as a community. And it's also been a place where we have been able to consolidate a lot of items that have that we see coming up in the future, whether those are initiated locally or those come from some other place. And so so when we talk about the future funding for the HIP, you know, there are big chunks of this which is about current resources and existing resources. As you've mentioned, there's a part about getting new resources, and so we still do need to go through in more detail as we really begin the HIP period in July and figure out exactly, you know, one of the first orders of business is to figure out what the forecast looks like, where we have good funding and where we don't. So planning is one example of that, but that kind of helps hopefully shed some light on our process going forward.
I have a follow-up. I did note that the state mandated planning work had identified $400,000 and that the total funding needed for that would be close to $1 million. When I saw only half of that allocated, I just assumed that was because I don't think I've seen a major planning effort that took less than a year. And so I figured the other half would end up getting allocated next year. Wasn't the intent is that $1 million is what's needed for the work that needs to be done this year?
I think the intent was, you know, honestly, that was an item that, you know, we didn't allocate a lot of one-time funds. And this is one where we knew, like, we have some mandated work. We can't afford to put it all in this budget with all the constraints that we had kind of put on it to try to keep it try not to grow our gap bigger before we had a chance to go through priority-based budgeting. So we put in what we thought we could afford and what we thought staff would be able to accomplish in this first year.
Okay. And so it's not that we knew we need to do $800,000 worth of planning work this year, and we just scrambled to find that, but rather we're going to fund it more iteratively as the work is being done.
You know, Eliza, I think that, you know, from a planning perspective, we easily have $800,000 worth of work that needs to get done. If you look at the stack up of all of the neighborhood planning efforts that people want to get accomplished, plus what we're working on already, what's in the budget is what I felt like we could reasonably afford and do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Did we have anyone else on the housing implementation pipeline? Going once, going twice. I think that we can say thank you and
thank you.
Move on then to our open discussion. So for our round robin, I am starting with Councillor Evans to be followed by Raina Jackson, and I'm going to be pasting the full list into chat for once. So you can see where you're going to be coming up. Councillor Evans, start us off. Councillor Evans, if you're not available at this moment, we can let you pop in when you are ready, and we can move ahead to...
Councillor Evans dropped off, but he's coming back into the meeting.
Okay, I'll make sure he gets his round when he does return. And for now, that brings us to Raina, followed by Councillor Groves.
You know, just listening to the conversations and the vast need that is out there when it comes to affordable housing and unhoused locations across the city, just underlines and underscores the need for the partnerships that we have with, you know, our other partners like Lane County and our, you know, other nonprofits in the community. And so there may be something that was already sent out, and apologies if not, but there could be some more information that kind of just lists all the various partners that we are working with to provide these services, just as a reminder and kind of a refresh. That would be great.
For some reason I was waiting for a response on that, but I think that was more a request for something in the future. So I see that Councillor Evans has rejoined us. So I'm gonna get us back in order by giving him his opportunity. Oh, in chat, he's reconnected, but he would like to go last. I will reorder appropriately. So Councillor Groves, and you'll be followed by Councillor Semple.
Thank you, Chair. I really have nothing, no questions to ask about what we just heard. One thing I've been looking for the right time to say it, I had made quite a few comments going into the budget process this year of my plans to make a motion to bolster parking enforcement. But given what we've seen, the 4 new neighborhood services officers, what they've been able to produce, as well as seeing the city manager having 4 additional positions built in this budget, I will not be making that motion. I just want to see how things go before we spend more money that we may not need to spend. So that's really takes care of everything I have to say up till now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark followed, or sorry, Councillor Semple followed by Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Thank you for both presentations. I don't have any questions or discussions about that. But as far as motions go, I'm working on a motion for a second downtown loo paid for with ARPA funds. And I'm working on where to get the money for maintenance and etc. So that will be coming.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark, followed by Shivan.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I probably should have asked this and jumped in when all the folks doing the HIP presentation were present on the screen, but I'm sure they'll jump back in if they want to here. I can see Alyssa's name still there, so that's something there. One of the motions that I intend to make is to add money or move money to be able to do something that I think assists the HIP and helps us understand where we are. So my question, in order to help me formulate the right motion, is of Alyssa, I think. And it would be with regard to growth monitoring. Can you tell me all of the components of what's in that? And my motion will be around land sufficiency. And so I want to know how much of that is already planned to be done with regard to growth monitoring. I mean, are we looking at, hey, you know, 15 to 35 said we need X, our growth has been, you know, X plus whatever, and that means we're gonna at some point need, or is that something that needs to be studied appropriately for us to meet the 20-year supply numbers inside our current window, and say if the window were now and 20 years out? Okay. Can you address?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Clark. That analysis will actually come out of our housing capacity analysis. That is an outcome of a House Bill 2003. Right. And so we have a state mandated deadline to complete that work by the end of 2026. Right. And as part of that, so it's not just here's our housing capacity study at the end of 2026, but if it finds that we don't have enough land inside our urban growth boundary, we will have to take measures and or expand the urban growth boundary by the end of 2026. So growth monitoring feeds into that housing capacity analysis, but that's really where that land sufficiency analysis happens.
I appreciate that. As my colleague, Councillor Ye, mentioned earlier today, we know we're in a housing crisis. We already know that. It's not something we can wait a little while to do. It's something we need to address right now. She made that point really, really clear, and I agree with her. And so we don't have time to wait until 26. Can you tell me the earliest time we would have the kind of land sufficiency information I'm referring to?
Believe you'll have some tentative information as part of the growth monitoring work session that is coming up later this year, but the housing capacity rules are changing as we speak. So I'm not sure if it's going to be an apples to apples comparison. So part of the issue is that some of those state rules are changing. And so our new housing capacity analysis will need to meet the new rules.
Can you address how the nature of how they're changing and at what point this year?
That I'll have to get back to you on.
The first part or the last part?
Both.
Okay. And you mentioned you think they're coming back later this year with some of you're coming back later this year with some of that information. Is there a way we as a budget committee, as a council, could prioritize that work and get it back sooner?
You're scheduled to have your growth monitoring work session on June 8th. So it's like right around the corner.
Okay. I thought she mentioned fall or something. Thank you very much. So what's final approval on the budget, Sarah?
I don't remember the exact date, Twyla or Vicky do, into June.
So we're going to have the growth monitoring before final approval on the budget?
Yes.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Well, I don't think there's any way we're going to approve the budget by June 8th. So yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shivan, followed by John.
Thank you very much for both presentations. I don't have any questions. I appreciate the information and seeing that we are actually looking at our most underserved populations and trying to raise them up. I look forward to sharing the information with some of the communities that I connect with and delving deeper into the HIP program. One thing I will mention, as I believe I've mentioned once before, is the median income for our city is very high compared to what a lot of people I know make. And so I would always be welcome to hear more information about how we can get affordable housing that's like actually affordable. So, but I appreciate both presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. John, followed by Councilor Ye.
Thank you. I appreciate all the presentations. I don't actually have any other questions or comments at this point.
Thank you. Councilor Ye, followed by Councilor Siret.
Yeah, I also don't have any questions at this time, but they were really great presentations and I appreciate staff's time tonight.
Councilor Siret, followed by Ryan Konofsky.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just reflecting on the two presentations, which I agree were really great, and I really appreciate bringing that information to the Budget Committee, and then connecting that with some of the public comment that we received. So I wanted to ask either the city manager or Mia or who's ever appropriate about, so the additional police officers, I believe, are being funded through the Community Safety Initiative. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, you know, if you look at just the police budget increase, there's a number of things built in there. There's a lot of alternative response. So the budget includes a number of community service officers, also includes some support for the downtown team. There's some support in there for an alternative medical response, emergency medical services, and some work with our municipal court, and a bunch of things that are really intended to not be to help with that sort of alternative response in the entire system. So yeah, it's not all police officers.
Great. And you know, there was the plea to, you know, invest further in cahoots, and then we got a thank you from Chris Hecht about what we are investing, you know, and a request for some more money, and I'll be considering that. But I think it's important for folks to recognize that even if cahoots staff got a significant raise, they would still be way less expensive than a police officer. And so when you look at, you can't just look at dollar figures to say, well, you're investing so many more dollars into police officers than you are into these alternative responses, because police officers come with PERS responsibilities, with health insurance, with all the things that go along with a unionized benefited position, which cahoots workers are not. So I think that's an important perspective to keep. And, you know, there's a lot of other things that we're investing in with our American Rescue Act Plan Act money that's called out, including some community support for childcare services. I don't know if we could get a little bit more detail on what that's going to look like.
Yeah, we can come back with that.
Great. And then Councilor Simple, I'll just put up a little warning flag on your request for a second downtown loo. Whitaker needs some love. Whitaker needs some attention. Whitaker needs some investment. We've got dozens, if not a couple of hundred homeless campers staked out all over my neighborhood. We had 230 tents in our park, in our central park in the middle of our neighborhood for just about 2 years. And I don't know if a loo is the highest priority for what they want to see for some investment in the community, but I know it's on their list. So we might have a little competition. So just letting you know that, but I do appreciate you advocating for downtown in the way that you do.
Why can't we ask for both?
Because they're super expensive.
Thank you. Ryan, followed by Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have much, but Councilor Syret, you kind of previewed the thing I was thinking, that I'm also very interested in looking at, cahoots and, hearing the folks that came in and gave their public testimony before. I think that the return on investment and the small dollars we spend there go a huge long way, and those folks are doing a lot of really good work. And I'd like to see that, make sure we are recruiting the best to make sure that they're serving our community in alternative ways. And so I will just leave it at that. That's a future interest of mine.
Councilor Zelenka, followed by Eliza.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Good presentations. Thank you for the information.
Eliza, followed by Catherine Ryan.
So as I was looking through the budget again, I just wanted to comment on how extremely well crafted I thought this budget was, given the challenges that we're facing right now, the amount of one-time money we have. And I could definitely see the attempt to balance and prioritize our limited resources in a way that reflected the feedback that we've gotten over the past few years. And I am very, very nervous about the conversations that we're going to be having next year. And some of what I'm looking at with this budget is every sort of, I get the impression, and Sarah can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're also a little worried about the ARPA money, that it's not an endless pool, that we've spent through a lot of it. And I'm trying to think of funding sources that aren't going to make us have to make harder decisions next year, that can be used for some of these things I'm hearing people talking about wanting to make motions about. And so it's hard, because there are definitely things in there that I want to see get more funding, but kind of where I am now is I'm going to have to vote no on trees and puppies and funding for anything that's going to make us have to have harder conversations next year. Because I really want to be able to have those conversations in the context of our broader priorities, and not just at the what we feel is the most important thing right now. And I feel like if I'm voting to give more money to trees and puppies, that means that next year we may have to cut something that we really wish we didn't have to. So that's a little bit where I'm feeling now. We'll see if someone comes up with something more appealing than trees and puppies.
Thank you. And it was half a second after I called on you that I saw our city manager had raised her hand. So
I'm good to go last, Ty. I wanted to just speak to the cahoots piece and a conversation I had with Chris Hecht.
Okay, perfect. In that case, let's hear from Catherine, followed by Councilor Evans.
Thanks, Ty. Appreciate the conversations and the presentations tonight. I'm realizing I need to go look at the housing implementation pipeline, so I actually have some sense of what's going on there. So if nothing else, I got that out of it. So just kind of flag for everyone, I am very much planning to put together a motion related to the cahoots funding. I'm happy, would love to kind of connect and talk with anyone else who is interested in working on that. And as I try to do, we'll be sure to kind of be proactive and reach out to folks and just answer questions, like let people know what I'm thinking. So that will be coming. I did have one question on page 38 of the budget document, which is the kind of overview of unhoused services by funding source. I was wondering whether any of the funding under the parking enforcement or the community focused patrols is would be used for sweeps or for sort of I guess sort of site cleanup after someone has left being different than moving people and cleaning up, that kind of thing?
It's mostly the cleanup, but it's also enforcing the rules around where people can be and where they can't be. So it's a mix. I wouldn't characterize it as a sweep, but I would characterize it around enforcement and management of the sites.
Okay. And then I think just to wrap up with a general comment kind of related to some of the conversation in the first presentation, and the fact that there are a lot of folks in our community who have significant mental health and substance use stuff going on. And a lot of them, just by nature of living on the street, experience significant trauma every day. And so I think it feels really important to me that we're making sure that we're recognizing that those are also humans who need safe places to be, who need places to be human, and all the things that go along with that. And that it's going to be really, really hard for someone who's living on the street to get their mental health condition under control, to access substance use treatment. It's like nearly impossible if you're also in that survival mode and you're trying to do that day in and day out. And so just wanting to kind of make a plea that as we're talking about this and we're thinking about it, that those are folks that we're also thinking about, and recognizing that getting them into places where they can be stable, where they can sort of have that support and get those needs met, is one of the best ways that we can get them to a place where they're then able to start like working through and accessing those supports that are going to help them be able to get some of that under control. So that's all.
Thank you, Councilor Evans, and then an opportunity for the mayor to chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Ty. I don't have anything, any critical issues or questions at this point. I would like to explore working on that cahoots motion with Commissioner Ryan, if you're amenable to that. Basically, that's it for me for the time being.
Thank you, Mayor Vinnis.
Yeah, thank you very much for a moment to speak. This is kind of a sobering conversation, I think, in terms of the level of need we have in our community and the constrained resources that we're grappling with. And I guess I know I'm eager to hear what the manager has to say about cahoots. And we did just have a presentation about both our homeless services and the housing implementation pipeline, but the homeless services in particular, recognizing that many of those nonprofits are working on very limited budgets. And so I think it would be helpful as we talk about, especially looking at wages and capacity, that we kind of understand that larger landscape of all of those nonprofits, what their wages are, what's comparable. We have contracts with all of them. And so it might be helpful to have some perspective in that cahoots conversation about because it'll feed into our longer term discussions, I think, around capacity with those organizations and what our contracts look like. So I guess I would just suggest some perspective, not looking at cahoots standalone and their budget issues, but the other organizations we're actually looking at as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And that gives me my opportunity, and I'm going to take it, and then I'm very interested to hear what our city manager has to say about cahoots, which is a topic I'm very interested in as well. I think there was a really good point made earlier by Councilor Syrett about how even with a significant raise, cahoots still does their work at a much lower price point than our sworn officers do. And when you look at the value and quality of the work that they provide, it makes sense to me that that might be an area of low-hanging fruit, in that sense that what we can get in return for our investment might be highest by investing more in expanding our partnership with them. And I think the mayor makes a really good point that that exact same logic may apply to many of our other excellent nonprofit partners as well. So I think exploring ways we can leverage those partnerships to get the most community benefit for our investment is a really worthwhile exercise in exploring how we want to spend the currently very limited dollars we have available in our budget with the situation that we're in right now. So that's some of what I'm thinking. I'm going to give our city manager the opportunity to chime in now, and then we'll move to a second round, which I have 3 hands for so far. If you want to join that, throw your hand up at your leisure.
Thank you so much, Ty. So I wanted to say a couple of things. One, a reminder, when I did my budget presentation, I talked a little bit about the awkwardness of the timing of when we're taking in information and preparing it, and then when you get it, because things change between when we prepare it and when you get it. So we were very thoughtful about trying to make sure we had the Whitebird piece covered and that we had Cahoots covered. And what's happened is that between when we built the budget and now, they've made a decision to raise the wages for their employees, which I cannot argue with. What I've also said, and I've said to Chris Hecht, is that we're in the middle of this alternative response study to try to understand, well, not in the middle, the beginning, but trying to understand the whole system and the cost of the whole system and how we sustain it. And we're looking at not just Cahoots, but at our own basic life support ambulances, which also go to a lot of those calls that Cahoots goes to. Those employees actually make less than Whitebird employees. And I've told him that I'm very uncomfortable taking one piece of the puzzle and one of our contractors, and raising them without looking at all the contractors that are working for us and our own employees. So he understood that. I understand why he's here, but I am committed to looking at that whole system and understanding what the total impacts are going to be going forward.
Thank you very much. Right now for a second round, I have Eliza, John, Councillor Surratt, and then Councillor Clark, and welcome additional hands as we work through that list. Eliza, start us off.
I think one thing that might be helpful as part of these conversations is a little bit more information about how the contracting process works with our individual contractors and how that ties into the budget. Because I know that those contract negotiations are not always going to sync up with the budget cycle. And so, and also like how is increases in those contract rates built into the budget? Because I feel like, is it an inflation-based thing where, it's materials and services, so we assume whatever the inflation rate is there a little bit more of the sort of cost of living depending on kind of the same way we do with some of the employees? And so, if, for example, one of the contractors who's providing some of the safe sleep sites, came back and negotiated a higher rate, would we see that in a supplemental budget? Would that be accounted for via other shifts within the department? Because I feel like there's a level of, we feel like we need to say at budget committee, we want to give money for this thing. And I see it with the human services contracts as well. But really understanding how that process works a little better, that may be helpful.
Thank you. John, and then I have Councillor Surratt.
Thank you very much. My couple questions regarding the Cahoots issue. Thank you, City Manager Mandari, for bringing that up. Perhaps you can answer, or unless Chief Cochran is on. How much are the EMTs who are working the BLS making per hour, or starting.
I think their entry rate is $16 an hour.
That's kind of what I was thought that where they were at. So I am super supportive of Cahoots. I'm supportive of funding them for additional services. I struggle a lot with adding money in our budget to give them raises since they are a subcontractor. That kind of I struggle with that a little bit because they are a contractor. But more, I struggle that I understand that we're having problems finding enough EMTs as it is, and to give money for Cahoots to give a 17% raise to their employees unless we're prepared to make a commensurate raise to our EMTs, we're going to have an even harder time retaining them, filling those positions. And I strongly advocate that we should be paying them more, but I fail to see where in the budget we're going to make that happen. So I'm supportive of giving Cahoots more money, in concept for expanded services, but I would struggle with a motion, to give them raises specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Surratt, followed by Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I fear that some of you may have misinterpreted what I was trying to say. I feel like where we're at in our investments are a pretty good balance. Cahoots cannot go to every call, right? There's lots of calls they cannot take because there's a weapon or a person who's known to be dangerous. So my point was that we're being critiqued for the amount of money we're spending, the dollars that we're spending on sworn officers versus the dollars we're spending on Cahoots. And that is not an accurate way to compare those two services, because you have to spend more dollars on 10 officers than you would on 10 Cahoots employees. And that those 10 Cahoots employees are a good investment up to a certain place, but you still need the 10 police officers, possibly more in my mind, to get to the level of public safety that our community frankly expects. And also then we have the alternative response. So that was the point I was trying to make. Not that we should be investing more in Cahoots at the expense of investing in our sworn and or community police officers. On the issue of giving folks a raise, I really appreciate what the city manager offered there. We are also having conversations about kind of stabilization of our nonprofit contractors at the Human Services Commission, which is a joint commission with Springfield and Lane County. So I don't know that we should be doing necessarily kind of ad hoc activities at the budget committee level, at the city budget committee level, when there needs to be more of policy conversation and then the direction from respective bodies, city council, board of commissioners, Springfield City Council, to take action. So I do want to see this analysis that the city manager has mentioned. I think that's going to be really important to that conversation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, followed by Councillor Zelenka.
Thank you. I agree entirely with everything that Councillor Surratt just said. I also agree with John, and I have a high degree of value for our Cahoots partners. I had some dear friends who used to drive around in the van and respond, and I think they were absolute, angels to be able to do that work with the patience of Job. And I don't know how they do it, but the work they do is critically important. But I would feel uncomfortable with us jumping in to raise their pay without us having a conversation about the rest of the way they structure their budget and how they pay everybody who works there, and all the components that operate perhaps differently than people might imagine. Number two, we implemented the Community Safety Initiative because there are 193 sworn officers at the beginning of that process, just like there were 2 years ago and 3 years ago and 4 years ago and many years ago when the population was in considerably smaller. And we've never raised the number of sworn officers in years to the point where 33% of 911 calls go unanswered because we don't have enough officers to cover them. That's why we put it into place. And I feel very strongly that we should support the increased number of officers because we haven't increased them in a very long time, and we need to keep up and deal with the level of service from police officers that the community has expected for years. And then lastly, I would say I got a good education on this, and I would hope that the rest of my colleagues and budget committee members get the same education from the police department at some point. That was a better breakdown of the conversation. When 911 gets a call, they don't either send cahoots or the police officers. That's not how it works. When they get a call of an emergency situation, there are 120 things that need to be done at that scene, and maybe cahoots can do 15 of them. And the officers responding need to do the other 105 based on, you know, the way the law reads, based on who can do what kind of things in an emergency situation. And so we really need to have a better understanding, in my opinion, of how call responses happen, because we often talk about it as if it was a choice of send one or send the other. And my understanding is that it almost never is that. So I think we would all benefit from better information about how, and I'll look forward to that study, Sarah, but how calls for service actually take place on the street, I think would benefit all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zelenka, followed by Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Chair. I totally support cahoots. I totally support the fire department and the EMTs too. It's not as simple as cahoots is good, therefore we give them more money. It isn't the cahoots system, it's the emergency response system. You can't just pull cahoots out of that system and say, fix that, because it doesn't work. It's kind of like one of those stress ball squishy things. So you squeeze it over here and some of it pops out over here. You get these unintended consequences that occur from dealing with only one part of it. So you need to deal with it holistically. And I guess one of the questions for city manager, when is that analysis going to be done? It's not next week.
No, not fast enough. So we've struggled to get a contractor on board, and so I think we went out with one RFP. We went out with a second RFP, and if Christy's still on the line, she might know. But I think we're still a little ways out. But we are actively looking at wages in the system and working on that internally.
Yeah, we're months out probably, right? Yeah, so you know, because it's a system, it's and there's lots of parts of it that seem out of kilter or maybe broken that we need to fix. So as Councillor Syrett said, there's other needs in the system. The human services system is woefully underpaid and have been for decades. And that's a glaring issue in my mind that's been around for years and years. And I've made numerous motions trying to get us back on track on that, but that's still a lingering problem. But I guess, you know, the point is that's not a simple problem looking for a simple solution. It's much more integrated, it's much more complex, and there's lots of unintended consequences by taking one action. I mean, if we increase cahoots and our EMTs leave and go become cahoots folks, what are we doing here? That's why we need to look at this holistically. Thanks.
Councillor Groves, followed by Councillor Semple.
Thank you, Chair. Much of what I was going to say has been covered, but I just wanted to hammer home on the important role that Cahoots plays. But again, they have a limited scope of practice. And I thought that was kind of a good analogy. There may be 114 things that need to be done. They can do 14 of them. And it's the same with a police officer and a firefighter paramedic. The level of training, the certifications you have to have and maintain, very high standards. And I would say the difference between officers and firefighter paramedics is maybe like this. And my experience with Cahoots responders, the difference can be much broader. For any increase in the budget for me to vote for, I would have to also see what performance standards we are putting in place to help ensure a more constant level of service, and that we're able to, well, have more reliability. I think Cahoots does a great job. I think the concept is even better. But it's just a matter of there's some things that get lost in practice out on the street. And I've said it last year, and I'll say it again. I actually think it would be helpful to have some responders actually talk about some of the experiences. If we can get people to be candid about some of what they see. And again, it's as we grow the service, as we grow the system, as we improve it, there's a lot of room to make it better. And I think this is an important component. But the scope of care that's given, the scope of skill that's presented, firefighter paramedics work under a physician, and paramedic cannot, once they have initiated treatment, they can't hand off to a lower level of care. So it's the patient sticks with the paramedic until they can hand them off to a higher level of care at a hospital. And, likewise, there's certain things that the police can do that Cahoots cannot do. And it's not like it's an either or. It's usually a response. And sometimes it has police, fire, and Cahoots all on the same scene. And that's just the way it works. So I think it's really important before we start jumping in and dabbling with one component of this, that we understand how the whole system meshes and fits together, because it is enlightening to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Semple.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the number of police officers. When I very first started, I went to Chief Kearns and said, why isn't this happening? And he said he didn't have enough officers. And I started my campaign for more money for more officers. And we have the Community Safety Initiative. And we still don't have more police officers. And that's because not very many people want to be police officers right now. And of those that do, fitting into Eugene, it is a small number of people. So I know they're constantly recruiting. The last time I talked to the chief, he had a group of people that were probably going to move on, but he has to be really careful about who he picks to be the right fit. And the pool of applicants is not very big. So it's still an urgent need for us to be able to respond to the large number of calls that aren't dire emergencies. So I hope that cleared it up.
Thank you. Shivan.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two things to say. The first one is that I'm very thankful to be part of this committee because I was able to communicate to our community members that Cahoots is funded by the police. The second thing I have to say is that I worry when a person with a gun comes at me, whether they're in a police uniform. And where I support our police departments, there are crimes out there that need a police response. When I used to work night audit, I would specifically try to get Cahoots because I felt safer with them. And if we're looking at public safety, I think it's very important to consider who the public feels safe with. And I support Cahoots wholeheartedly, and whatever we can do to provide an alternative in addition to our police presence that can handle situations that make me feel more comfortable. Even talking about it right now, I'm getting a little bit like, I think that other people will appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, and then myself.
I just want to say I appreciate sort of all the thoughts and comments that folks are sharing, and I am really appreciative that this is a space where we can have this conversation and get different perspectives on it. And I think one of the things that I'm kind of struck by is this is very, very similar to the conversation we had last year when they sort of came and said, we're drowning, we need help, and in the meantime, they sort of have done a lot of work and have put together a much more focused, narrow ask, which I think was part of what they heard last year in response to what they were asking for. And neither Kahoot staff nor myself can really do anything about how much the EMTs are getting paid, or sort of this other system level stuff. And so I think it's not that part isn't important and they aren't part of this bigger system, because obviously they are. For me, I feel like a piece of it is they're being really pretty clear about what they need right now to be able to provide the level of service that we are asking them to provide. And right now they're saying we need to be able to pay people more to get them to apply, to stay, and do that really hard work. So I just wanted to kind of share that perspective, and that's kind of what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking about it. And if I don't know how to fit it into all of the other stuff, just kind of in the current place that we're at with all of this. I also know that next year, the current contract is going to be up for renegotiation. I'm really hoping that a lot of this will all just kind of get baked in at that point, and we can stop talking about it year after year. But to me, it really feels like for this year, I think it's important for us to hear what they're saying, hear what they're asking for, to be able to provide the level of service that we are asking them to do, and to kind of get them through this final year of the contract at that service level that is higher than what their contract, their kind of base contract says. So that's where I'm coming from. Happy to have, other conversations with folks along the way. And I'm sure we'll talk about it more next week and the week after too.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate all the conversation that we've had on this. I think a lot of really good points have been made. I definitely agree that it's not only Cahoots that is having pay deficiencies and struggling to retain employees. And I think our EMTs are also a critical piece of this conversation. And the point about how it's a system and the complexities of the way dispatch calls function are well taken and very important. I would love to see more detailed dispatch statistics on Cahoots. I don't know if that's something that there's any chance can be provided on the fly. I'm guessing not, but if not, I'd love to get this as supplemental information. How often, how many calls is Cahoots dispatched to, and then what percentage of them is it only Cahoots versus Cahoots and other agencies like police or EMT or fire or anything else? I would love to know how often those crossover scenarios occur versus how often we dispatch Cahoots only. When it is Cahoots only, I would love to know what percentage of those Cahoots handles fully on their own versus what percentage then require follow-up from another agency, because I know sometimes Cahoots is dispatched first and then Cahoots will call for the police to come to that scene. So I don't know, but I don't know exactly how often that occurs. So a lot of detailed stats along those lines would be something I would really like to see more of. And I'm trying to think some in that category. There was another kind of specific question. Oh, yes. And then also what percentage, we talk a lot about the unanswered calls to 911 where police are tagged for the dispatch but aren't able to ultimately respond, those calls that go unanswered. I know that the same thing can happen when dispatch tags Cahoots as the responding agency and they're unable to respond. So I'd also like to know how many unanswered calls where Cahoots was deemed the best respondent did Cahoots fail to then respond to as well? Because unanswered calls aren't only unanswered police calls, given those complexities of how the dispatch process works. So all of those are breakdowns that I think would really help inform this conversation, and I'm hoping we can get some of those stats.
Can you repeat the question? Just kidding. So we do have a lot of that information, and we'll be here next week with the Community Safety Initiative. So if we have time, we can potentially present some of this information next week. The chief could. If we run out of time, we'll make sure you have it in written form, and we'll try to get a bit. It'll be hard to get a really big picture that includes all of the medical calls as well, but we'll do our best.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's all I had. And I don't currently have any other hands. Do we have anyone else wanting to jump in for a second or possibly a third round? Or Councilor Groves?
Thank you. Just a quick point. Sarah, when you come back and staff comes back with that information, could there also, we also see a breakdown between the basic life support, which are the EMTs, they're not firefighters, and the firefighter paramedics on the ambulance, just so we can get a sense of that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Again, we'll do as much as we can next week as possible, and everything else we'll have to do sort of supplemental.
Okay, well, what I seem to be seeing is that we are coming to the conclusion of what discussion we have in us tonight. So I think we had a really full evening, 2 really excellent presentations with a ton of information provided, some very robust conversation on a couple different topics. And we also heard about several motions that we now know are coming that we can begin considering. So that was a whole lot done tonight. We've already approved the minutes, so we can move into wrap up and talk a little about where the next steps are. We have 2 more meetings. We have next week on the 18th, where we'll be hearing that presentation on the CSI with, I imagine, some great interest. And then we have our final meeting on the 25th, which is our opportunity to consider and review all of our proposed motions and ultimately send a budget on to the City Council. Both of those meetings will have opportunity for public testimony. Between now and then, we as always have our opportunity to send any additional questions that we come up with to Vicky, as well as working with Vicky and the rest of the finance staff on any motions we're working on. They're excellent help in making sure that you've crafted a motion that is viable. So please don't try to do your motions on your own. Just running over things that I think we all know, but it's just helpful to have said it out loud. And so we're going to go with the same basic motion process that we've used previously, including last year. People have been signaling their motions ahead of time, which is very helpful, and I appreciate that. Continue to reach out to finance staff to work with language, identify funding sources, and all of that. Staff is going to be compiling a list of all the intended motions that are submitted to them and provide those as part of meeting packets as we move forward. We aren't going to entertain the motions for discussion and deliberation until that final meeting. And that will give us a chance to hear all our information. And then we have our final deliberation of considering all the motions that we want and they pass or they fail, and then we have an amended budget to move forward with. So that's the basic structure of where we're at and what we're doing over the next 2 weeks. And I look forward to working through all of that with you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. I get to send you home early. We're adjourned at 8:20 p.m.